Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. In this video, I'm going to show you the Panzani Gambit. You've asked for it a lot, and it makes perfect sense, because it's a spectacular gambit, very simple to play, very attractive, with some brilliant attacking plans. So without further ado, let's get into it. We start like a game with a Spanish opening, an Italian opening, or a Scotch. All of these openings always start the same way. Double king's pawn, and we threaten their pawn with the knight to f3. How's this pawn defended? Well, with the most popular move in chess. The good thing about this Ponziani gambit is that most games start the same way. Therefore, you'll be able to use it in the vast majority of your games. And here, the move that sets the Ponziani gambit apart from all the others is this one right here, c3. A move that's apparently very quiet and doesn't threaten anything, but it's a tremendously interesting move. The first thing it allows us to do is support the center with a lot of strength. In other words, what we want is to support d4 and occupy the whole center so it's ours, and so our pieces, and especially our bishops, can come out with a lot of freedom. Very well. What is the most common move here for the black pieces? Bishop c5 doesn't seem like a very good move, because we could directly threaten it with the pawn to d4. Here, the most used move, without a doubt, is knight f6. And do you know why? Because it's very easy. They develop a knight, which is what you should do in the opening, plus it's the kingside knight. And not only that, but it also threatens a pawn that's very hard for us to defend right now, because if we play d3, we block our bishop, right? Now, we can't play c3 because we've blocked it with our pawn. So how do we defend this pawn? Well, the idea of this Ponziani gambit is to play d4 directly. You gotta love it. It's incredible. Very well, that's true. We're leaving the e4 pawn hanging, but it's not that easy to capture, because if it is, we could recapture this pawn here, since it's being attacked by two pieces. So here, when we play d4, if the black pieces want to win a pawn, they only have one way to do it. How? First, by exchanging these pawns, which is the right move, and after we capture, then they have indeed won a pawn. But of course, chess teacher, are we gonna make it that easy for our opponent? Well, no, we're not gonna make it that easy for him. The idea is that when they capture this pawn, which yes, is the right move, okay? We're not going to recapture. Remember this. We want to advance first, threatening this knight on f6, which right now is going to be cannon fodder. We're going to attack it. Very well. Where can this knight go? Many of you will be tempted to come here with the knight. Right now, this knight is attacking this e4 pawn. The other one too. Both of them are attacking this pawn. This would be a very bad move because we would simply recapture the d pawn. We're left with a very strong center, and this knight is now in a terrible spot. It can never retreat. We're going to force it forward with this pawn, and when it goes for these side squares, we'd simply eliminate it with the bishop. So we'd double the king side pawns and all that. That's why here, after the move e5, the knight has to come toward the center. Much better than going toward the side. And we're going to follow up now with an opening move that develops a piece and also maintains the initiative because we're threatening this knight. All right, if we wonder where that knight could go, first, it can't be defended by any piece because the bishop can't come to defend it. So this knight has to move. All right, once we reach that conclusion, let's see where this knight can go. E7 looks very sad because the bishop can't get out. The best one, without a doubt, seems to be b6. It puts the knight in a good position and also threatens our bishop. And here, friends, I bring you two options in case you woke up a bit more aggressive or a bit more passive that day, or if you're in the mood for a fight or not. I bring you two options. A brutal one with bishop takes f7, directly threatening the bishop, sacrificing the bishop, which I'll show you now and you're gonna love it. And another option, which is bishop b3, which I'll also explain in case you're not in the mood for fireworks that day. Bishop takes f7 is probably my favorite move, although I have to admit that I often play bishop b3 as well. You'll see why. What's the idea behind bishop takes f7? Why are we sacrificing the bishop? Well, the big idea is that now we can jump in with the knight and we're forcing the king to make a choice. I've noticed in the database that half of the people put the king here. This is already checkmate, friends. This is already checkmate, and half of the people put it here. The good move is this one here, and now we'll see how to continue. But if they go to g8, which I've seen on more than one occasion, queen b3 is checkmate. The king can't escape. They can only put pieces in between. In this case, we'd capture en passant, and if they block with the bishop, we capture that too, given checkmate. Therefore, here, after this check with the knight, if they go to g8, it's going to be queen b3 checkmate. And I've run into it. Instead, the good move is king e8. Alright, here we're going to continue with castling. Careful, we're down a piece, okay? You have to be aware, I mean, if you choose to play this variation of bishop takes, f7, sacrificing a bishop, you must be aware that you're down a piece. It's not easy, right? Mind you, we compensate for it with a great attack. This knight here is not easy at all to kick out. You'll see that they can never play a h6, because they would lose the game immediately. I'll explain it to you now, okay? If they try to kick it out with bishop e7, which is a perfectly normal developing move, they develop the bishop, lining it up with their queen to threaten our knight. You can simply play this move right here, h4, so that if they decide to take the knight now, we would replace it with the bishop. And watch out, because this queen would be in a very bad spot. The knight would have to retreat, and this position would be quite difficult for black, right? Very well. Here, if at any point they decide, for example, to capture this knight, watch out because they're getting into trouble. We bring in the rook, we pin the knight. If they decide to capture here, they're helping us bring another piece to the board and open lines for the queen. Therefore, I wouldn't even consider these moves practically. So if they make this move, remember, it's like this. Sorry about that. If they do this, you defend with the pawn. But just teacher, you just told me that if they play h6, they've already lost the game. Correct. They can never play h6, sorry, because we would simply enter with the queen and it would be mate. The king would have to move and we would enter with the queen and it would be mate. And why is this mate if they play h6? Because if this pawn were here, they could simply defend against the mate. But when they advance to h6 to kick out the knight, then we simply enter with the queen, and on the next move, we deliver this massive checkmate. So look how simple it is. e4, e5, knight f3 attacking the pawn, knight c6 defending, c3, knight f6, d4. And now we've seen that the only way for black to try and get their way was to capture this pawn. And we weren't going to recapture, but first, very importantly, threaten this knight. We've concluded that this knight should go to the center and we play knight c4. They kick it out with knight b6, and this is where we just saw bishop takes f7. And I told you we had another very good option, which is bishop b3. This seems like a very simple option, chess teacher. It seems boring. Friends, you don't know what you're talking about. Bishop b3 is an epic move. And I'll tell you one thing, you're going to give me a big thumbs up when you see this variation here. I'm going to do something. To interact with you, I want you to leave me a comment below on which variation you prefer, the bishop takes f7 variation or the bishop b3 variation. Let's see which one wins. Let's see how many prefer one and how many prefer the other, okay? I'll be reading all of your comments. Very well. Bishop b3. What's the idea? Now, first of all, we're threatening to take control of the center. This variation would be spectacular for us. A bishop pointing at the castled king, a terrifying center for our opponents, a lot of space. So here, black must realize this threat. If not, great, we'll catch you. But here, black must try to capture themselves for that very reason, to secure their extra pawn that we gave away in the gambit. And not only that, but also to prevent us from having this pawn center. We recapture with the knight, and now we continue with our excellent plans. What should the black pieces do here? Well, the most common thing is for them to develop this bishop to castle, either to c5 or b4, right? What do we have to do here? Quickly, when they pin us, when they develop the bishop, well, actually, as soon as we can, we're gonna castle. There's no rush for that. Let's just castle. Now, black can also castle. And here's where our real crushing plan begins. Pay attention, because this bishop is going to become one of the main players. The knight jumps in without hesitation to attack the castled king. Knight to g5, exclamation mark, huh? What are we threatening? Well, first of all, we're putting a lot of pressure on the f7 square. Not just with the knight, but also with the bishop. See it? Thanks to being right here. Besides, we're threatening something else, bringing the queen in through h5. So we'd be threatening checkmate on h7, and we'd also threaten to enter on f7 with three pieces, bishop, knight, and queen. So here, black is starting to see that their plan to move pieces to the queen side isn't a good one. Mind you, it's not their fault because we forced them into it. How can they try to defend? Many of you will say, well, chess teacher, they kick your knight out, you have to retreat, and it's all over. Well, no. Why not? Because h6 doesn't stop us from playing queen to h4. I'm really loving this gambit. I'm telling you the truth. Queen to h4 is a wonderful move, no matter how much they attack the knight. What are we threatening? Well, the threat is obvious. With three pieces, we're threatening the f7 square. In other words, if they don't take the knight, we'll simply take right here. But what happens if they take the knight? How should we continue, chess teacher? Because we're down a knight. Well, now, one idea could be to take this pawn with the bishop, threatening the queen. That wouldn't be a bad idea, huh? But there's a much better move. And it's a hidden move because it looks like a very quiet move, but it's actually a killer. You took my knight, so here I go with the other one. Knight to e4, once again, exclamation mark. This knight is threatening something very serious, you know? It's simply threatening knight takes pawn and queen to h7 checkmate. Can they stop it? It seems impossible, right? Can they defend this pawn? No, because the f pawn is pinned thanks to our bishop, again from b3. Remember how it looked like a quiet move? Not at all. From b3, it's directly eyeing the king, therefore paralyzing the defense. And here the move I see most often, friends, is a move that also loses on the spot. How would you try to defend this? It seems the only way would be to kick the queen out and see what happens. But we simply capture the pawn with the queen. Remember well, this pawn is pinned, so this pawn was free. Check, and this will be checkmate. How? In the following way. First, the king has to move out of check. And now, well, we check with the queen, so he comes back, and we move in with the knight to deliver a massive checkmate. Notice how important it was to bring the knight over here. Remember to let me know which variation you like best down in the comments, friends. Did you think this was the best move? Well, not at all. Knight f3, knight c6, c3, knight f6, and d4. We just saw that the most logical thing here was to capture this pawn. But look, chess teacher, I'm absolutely sure that if I play this, they won't always capture the pawn. Many times, they'll also capture this pawn right here. True, they don't gain a pawn, but it also looks like a very tempting move. They're capturing a central pawn with the knight in exchange for this one. True, but, well, the game can go on. How should I continue? Well, friends, you have no idea what's coming for them. Simply put, we're not going to recapture directly. Remember this. First, we want to recapture with the knight, but their knight is in the way. So first we advance like in the previous variation. The good thing about this Ponziani game is it leaves us many gaps to keep pushing. This knight has to retreat. And now we capture the pawn on e4. And here we reach a position I love with a typical Ponziani opening trap. How would you kick out, friends, this knight that's so annoying? Why do I say it's so annoying? Because we can simply come and threaten a fork right here. In some cases, we can advance through here and destroy our opponent. This knight is a good knight, but of course it can be kicked out very easily with d6. And what happened here is that they've opened up this diagonal. They've created a huge weakness. Bishop b5 taking advantage of the weaknesses. And this is very favorable for us. Let me explain. Check. They can't block because in this case we'd simply give mate, or if not mate, they'd have to give up the queen. See? Because there's no other way, they'd have to give us the queen directly, we'd capture it with the knight. Therefore, the only move they have available to try and stop it is c6. Okay, seems fine, but then we play pawn takes c6. Very good move. What do we threaten then? Well, now we have multiple threats. First, capturing this pawn with a discover check, threatening two pieces, and, for example, it could follow pawn takes pawn, and when they block, we'd capture here and win a queen. That would be huge, right? This would be a threat. If they try to avoid it, well, we'd also have the threat of advancing discover check, and we'd win the queen. That would also be huge. So here, black only has one, how do you say it? one attempt to save themselves, and they must do it perfectly because if they fail, they're done. The only way they have to save themselves is pawn takes pawn, right? And now we'll capture with the knight threatening the queen, also threatening the king with the discovered check, right? If, for example, they try to block, we capture the queen. If they capture the knight, we capture with the bishop check. I take the rook, I take the knight, I take everything. So here, they only have one single move to save themselves. Pay attention, okay? To save themselves. Simply to keep the game even. And it would be very rare for your opponents to find all the perfect moves, right? The only move that saves them is queen b6. So that if we make a discovered check, they would take our bishop and it would just be a peace trade. If they find the right move, chess teacher, what do I do? Easy. If they find the only saving move, which is knight b6, I would play knight d4, discover check, and I defend the bishop. So now they have to deal with the check. For example, with the bishop, there's no other way, right? Otherwise, they'd have to move the king. And now, when they block with the bishop, we trade bishops so that, yes, it's true, we're even, but we're up a pawn. And besides, the opponent can't castle because they've already moved the king. And not only that, but in their precarious situation, they must develop this bishop, and for example, they can move the knight. The precarious situation of the pieces could mean that, for example, in many cases, like this one, we could give a check and on the next move take the knight and we'd be up a piece. Therefore, here, even if they found the right move to not lose on the spot to all these checks, they have to be very careful because we're the ones who have it easy, having to find attacking moves. The ones who have to defend and have a hard time are them. Here, the serious mistake is playing d6 because it opens the line for us to come in with all the checks, with the knight and with the bishop. The good move for black is the following: knight g6 to be able to develop the bishop. This is the good move, but don't worry, I'm going to explain how to play because it's very simple. We trade knights, it's that simple. I capture with the h-pawn. You already know it's much better to capture with the rook pawn toward the center than to capture with the f-pawn. Besides, not all pawns are worth the same, just so you know. The h-pawn isn't actually worth 1 point, it's worth 0.7 or something like that, because all pawns point toward 2 squares and the h-pawn only points toward 1. So if we capture inward, this pawn becomes something better, because suddenly it controls 2 squares, right? Very well, how should we continue? Here, we could do whatever we want, right? Bishop d3, bishop c4. But I'm going to recommend a line that I love when they make the correct move. This line puts the opponent in trouble. Queen e2. Let's see, chess teacher, what are you doing? You're blocking in your own bishop. Yes, but we're forcing our opponent to do exactly the same thing, because if they do anything else, like for example defending the knight, we play f3 and we've already won the knight. When you have a pin, you just have to attack the pinned piece with a pawn and you'll manage to win it. So the only way to get out of the pin and defend is queen e7. There's no other way. And here we're going to play bishop e3. Simple as that. So that black has a very difficult time playing. At some point, they might make a mistake. It's true, it's a very even game, but I definitely prefer the position of the white pieces. Now, a very common mistake I see is, for example, playing queen to d7 now that the pin no longer exists. Sorry, queen to d6 so that they can develop the bishop. But honestly, the pin does still exist. We could play, for example, f3, winning the knight. Why do I say winning the knight, chess teacher, if it can escape? Well, no, this knight couldn't move because then there'd be a discovered check. Bishop to c5, check, and I'm going to take the queen. No matter how much they cover with the queen, this queen can still be captured. Let's see, chess teacher, after the move c3, you already told me that bishop to c5 isn't the best move of all. But what happens? That many times, you who watch the videos might have 1600 elo, or even less. That's okay. That means we find in many games that they don't make the correct reaction. Bishop to c5 isn't a good idea because it lets us play d4 directly. But I'm going to give you a move here that you're going to love. Knight takes e5. It's a super good and very typical reaction. We give away the knight. Why? Because now with the move d4, we'll win back a piece. They have two options here. The first natural reaction, which is bishop takes pawn. Since they're losing a piece, well, at least they get a pawn for it, right? So we're even in material again, but here we'd be left with a strong pawn center, the bishops come out beautifully, bishop pair, a position that's undoubtedly much better for white. So here, what's the typical reaction here when this fork exists? Bishop to d6, that's almost always the correct reaction, so that when we capture, the bishop is placed in a tremendous possession, blocking position, and that way we haven't given up the bishop. We've given up the knight, we still have the bishop pair. Well, in this precise situation, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because of the move f4, which allows us to have a super comfortable game. That is, if the bishop comes here, it's basically already lost, right? Because we have a massive, brutal diagonal here. If it goes to d6, which is the good reaction, then we have an extremely strong position as well. I recommend the move bishop to e3, and I'll explain why. First, to prevent this bishop from becoming active. As you can see, this diagonal's useless to it. This one too. The only one it has is this diagonal right here. Therefore, if we play bishop to e3, we've just completely killed the bishop. Typical mistakes I see, knight to e7. They've already lost the bishop, it has no squares. Another mistake I see, developing the knight via f6. We'd have a fork again, and we'd win a piece. So it seems they have it quite difficult here, right? They can't develop this bishop either, because then they'd have to move this other bishop from d6 first. They can't develop the bishop, the knight. They can't develop the bishop. They have to play b7 to come here. This is the most typical, and I usually find myself in th with this continuation. Let me explain. Bishop c4, bishop b7, castle. And now, once all this is done, we let them take this pawn here, but we don't care because we have the reaction bishop d4. This is just an example, okay? Don't memorize it. It's just an example that I come across a lot. Bishop d4, I threatened this point here, so we'd win the rook. Knight f6, now that the advance is gone, and then rook c1, rook e1 is going to win material, right? We're threatening a pin no matter how much they castle. Who's defending this bishop? The knight? Well, I take the knight first, and now I take the bishop, so that I'm left with a material advantage and a much better position. Oh yeah, I see this all the time. Many opponents say, ooh, c3, what a strange move. I don't want to complicate things. I want to play it simple with d6 and have everything nice and defended. And surely nothing will happen here. You're bound to run into people who play that calmly. How should you react against them? Well, I love it when they do this, because they let me set up this massive pawn center with d4 right away. Not only do I set up the center, but I also threaten to advance. This knight is restricted thanks to the c-pawn. That's why they have to recapture here. What do we capture with? With the pawn or the knight? Well, with the pawn, to have this strong double pawn center to give us plenty of space for our bishops, center control, right? We don't care what they do. A very typical reaction is bishop e7, which is very passive. Knight f6 can be advanced. One that seems quite aggressive and interesting is bishop g4, right? With this pin on our on our knight on f3, thus threatening a bishop takes knight, and if we taking this pawn, but we don't care. Why? Because if they take here, we're not going to take with the queen, because knight takes d4 would follow, but we're going to take with the pawn, and our opponent will say, look, I'm much better here. White's pawns are terrible. Well, don't be mistaken, because we're the ones who are much better off here, and I'm going to explain why. f3, this pawn to f3 is reinforcing our center. And not only that, but we have a bishop pair that acts with tremendous force. And on top of that, we can keep threatening with great strength. Let me explain. For example, against any move by the opponent, we're going to make an effective pin. Which pin is it, chess teacher? Bishop g5? No. No. Bishop b5? No. Queen a4. Much better than the two we just saw, which can be kicked away with the a and h pawns. Queen a4 is making a tremendous pin, and we're threatening nothing less than playing d5, winning a piece. This wouldn't be possible with the bishop because they kick it away first with a6 and then with b5. So queen a4 is trying to win the knight, but it's true they can still put the queen in the middle and defend themselves. That's it. You place the queen here, and I'm going to play this great move. Why is this move, h4, such a great move? because our opponents don't see it, and they often castle. But what we're threatening is bishop a3, winning the game. In this case, we'd win the queen, right? Because of the pin. But what if they see it? They say, oh, he wants to play bishop a3, threatening the queen, and it'll be very dangerous. And they decide to move the queen. In this case, well, then they wouldn't have the queen here anymore. We would simply win the knight. And if they decide, for example, to say, well, I'll play bishop e7 and castle, whatever, well, I don't care. Bishop a3, I force you to move the queen. And when you move the queen, I simply put this pawn here, and I'm creating quite a few problems for you because now this knight can't move. And one way or another, I'm going to end up winning the piece. The Ponziani gambit is just totally spectacular. If you like the way I explain things, give me a like. It costs you absolutely nothing, and that way you can keep learning chess for free with my videos, and I really appreciate it a lot. I hope you loved it. Subscribe to the I'm choking, excuse me. Subscribe to the channel if you like these kinds of videos, because there's a new one every day, and we'll see you tomorrow. As always, friends, in the next video. Goodbye.